So this is to talk about me trying to stay above water. If you're looking for something else, you're in the wrong place. So I want to say hi to everyone. My name is Klug. I work as a software architect / developer at a company called Active Solution in Stockholm, which has very little to do with why I'm here today, because I'm here today to talk about mental health, and my mental health, to be perfectly honest. And what I do and where I work has very little to do with that. Or does it? Because first of all, if I hadn't had the support of my company, I wouldn't be able to be here to talk to you at all today. And if it hadn't been for them supporting me in general, I wouldn't be in IT anymore at all. And on top of that, if you look at the amount of time you spend working throughout your lives, the choices we make when we choose careers and employers has a massive impact on our mental health. So to say that what I do and where I work hasn't got anything to do with talk isn't really true, but there's no correlation. I'm not standing here talking about mental health because I work at Active Solution. Anyhow, so I'm here doing a talk that has been brewing in the back of my mind for several years, to be perfectly honest. Ever since Arthur Doler was here at NDC Oslo in 2018 doing a talk in a room a couple of meters in that way about mental health in our industry. But the thing is, it actually took me this long to do this talk because it is a scary topic to talk about. And I guess the question is why? Why am I here doing a talk that I find scary on a topic I find scary to talk about? And there are several reasons to this, and some of them are very personal, I must admit. But the main reason is actually the fact that it is scary to talk about. The fact that it took me years to work up the courage to even send this talk to a conference at all, and the fact that it took me years to build up the courage to stand on a stage and say, hey, I'm Chris, I struggle mentally sometimes. It's not a simple thing to do. And it shouldn't be that hard, right? Something as common as mental health shouldn't be hard to talk about. It shouldn't be a scary thing to talk about. So sure, public speaking is scary in itself. It's like number 1 or number 2 of the most common fears that people have in the world. I have a hard time blaming that because I've been speaking on stages for 10 to 15 years at large and small conferences, so that's not the thing. But no talk has ever scared me as much as this talk does, to be perfectly honest. No talk has ever taken as long to prepare as this talk has done. And no talk has ever meant as much to me personally, I think, either. And the problem is, as soon as I started working on this talk, imposter syndrome kicked in. We've all had that, right? Who would want to hear me talk about that? There are other people out there that are struggling way worse than me. Maybe they should go and do it. I've even found ways to cope with my own problems to the point where I haven't had like a serious episode in a couple of years. So who the hell would want to listen to that? And maybe I should just skip it, let someone else write it. But I've actually decided to ignore that, or I've decided to try and ignore that and come here and tell my story. Yes, there might be other people's, or not might, there are other people's out there that are struggling way worse than me, and I would love for those people to write their own talks and go up on stages around the world and talk about their experiences, so that the rest of us can understand what they are going through, what their situation is like, and what life is like with those struggles. But until that happens, you're just going to have to make do with me, because I'm here. Sorry about that. So Robin Williams once said, I think the saddest people always try their hardest to make people happy because they know what it's like to feel absolutely worthless, and they don't want anyone else to feel like that. And I think that statement is really, really true. And I also feel like that might be the reason why this talk is so important to me. If I can stand here and talk about it and help anyone in any way, I have no problem being on a stage exposing my problems if it helps. However, before we go any further, I want to highlight the fact that I'm a developer. I am not a trained mental health care professional who knows shit. I've built this around my own experiences, my own thoughts and all of that, not scientific studies and control groups and things like that. But I also believe that personally, I connect more to a person telling their personal experience when it comes to stuff like this than I do graphs and diagrams from some clinical study somewhere in the world. And I really hope that you guys do too. But anyhow, I want to go back to the imposter syndrome for a little while. And it's not just that I question my own qualifications for doing this talk. I actually believe that a lot of other people would question my qualifications as well. And the reason for that is that very, very often when I tell people about my problems, I get the response, "Oh, I would never have thought that about you," or "You're the last person I expected that from." And I kind of get that it's probably meant as support, but it really, to me, comes out as a testament to two things. It comes out as a testament to, first of all, how well I hide my problems if I don't want you to know about them. That's not hard, to be perfectly honest. But it also comes out as a testament to how we perceive people with mental health issues. And I'm apparently not that guy. I kind of get that. I'm a big guy, shaved head, tattoos, wear loud shirts that scream, "Hey, look at me." I go around the stages screaming, "Look at me." Doesn't scream depression. Completely get that. And on top of that, I don't actually have any reason to be sad. I don't have a reason to feel bad, ever, at all, basically. I still have both my parents in my life, and I talk to them on a weekly basis. I have a brother who has a wonderful family that I get to hang out with. And I'm married to my best friend, and I've been that for years. And we just expanded our family with this little thing. And who can be sad with that in your apartment? And on top of that, I like what I do. I like my job. I get to travel around to conferences all around the world to talk to people and share experiences and thoughts with passionate people who love what they do, and I love that. I live in a fantastic part of Stockholm, which I really love. I'm a mountain biker. I've got less than 5 minutes on my mountain bike to single-track trails in the woods of Stockholm. I drive a Tesla, which I never ever thought I would be able to do in my entire life, and now I do. I own a boat. I have a boat so I can go out in the summer and I cruise around the Stockholm archipelago when the weather is nice. And yes, that is a shitty picture of my boat. It's the only one I have on my computer. And it's not about the boat. It's about the fact that I have a boat, not what kind of boat I have. I have a way to go out on the water. And every year before COVID, I would go snowboarding in the Alps at least 1 week a year with my wife, and we would spend another week or two in Stockholm snowboarding as well. So honestly, I'm not trying to brag about what a wonderful life I have in any way at all. I'm just trying to explain that there is no reason for me to feel bad. There's no reason for me to be depressed. There's no reason for me to go home and feel like shit. It just doesn't exist. And I get that on the surface it's hard to believe that somebody that has that kind of a life would be depressed. Why would I? It's like I have a good life. But I guess it's more complicated than that. And yes, there's a bit of truth to what my mother's always said, and it's like, money cannot buy you happiness. It's not that I'm not unhappy. I am. I'm happy with my life. It's like, there's no problems with my life. It's more complicated than that. And also, I just want to mention that money can actually buy you a jet ski. And I have never seen anyone sad on a jet ski. I don't have a jet ski, so that might be the problem. But the thing is, even if I had a jet ski, I probably would still have periods when I didn't feel well. That's just the way it is. It isn't about not being happy. It's about more than that. So I guess the question is then, what is it then? What's my problem? So ever since about sort of my mid-teens, I've had these periods in my life where everything feels completely meaningless and I feel completely worthless. On top of that, it's like all of my energy gets drained away to the point where I walk around the world like a zombie. I have no energy to do anything, and all I can really do is go and sleep. Or really, all I want to do is go and sleep and escape the meaningless existence that is my life. And over time, this has kind of gotten worse. It's gotten worse over the years, and it's gotten to the point where I won't make it out of bed in the morning. I will have periods when I won't make it up at all, or I will make it out of bed, and I will make it all the way to the bathroom, and I'll stand there looking at myself in the mirror, and I'll feel completely worthless and have no energy to do anything else but to go back to bed and sleep. And this can go on for days or weeks. And sure, it might just sound like I've overexerted myself or overworked a bit, but it's actually a bit more complicated than that. There's a difference between having overworked yourself and this complete lack of both mental and physical energy, coupled with just the feeling of everything being completely meaningless and your mind telling you over and over and over again that your life is worthless, that there's no reason to live. And that's just the way it is. It is a bit different. It's the way it is. But the thing is, things don't just pop up overnight, right? They come creeping up on me, and I can feel them creeping up. I can feel my energy being drained away, and these feelings of meaningless and worthlessness just basically invading me completely. And it's hard to explain. It's like somebody pulls a veil over your eyes. It's like somebody pulls this thin piece of fabric over your eyes that basically dims all the colors of the world and kind of distances you from everything around you, everyone and everything that you have near you. And the weird thing is that it doesn't matter how much the logical side of me understands that this is happening and that it's stupid and that there's no reason for it. There is nothing I can do. This is just a gradual process that I can do nothing about, that over days and over weeks turns the world into a gray, meaningless mush where nothing means anything at all. And that's when my subconscious decides to go into some form of like survival mode. And the solution to my problems? Change. Like I get this massive urge to change something in my life. I need to move to the other side of the world, or I need to get another job, or I need to go and do some new activity I've never tried. And the more adrenaline, the better, apparently. I think the reason for that is adrenaline-filled activities tend to be very unforgiving when it comes to your focus. So if you take your focus away from an activity like that for just a short period of time, they tend to tell you, often quite violently, that that's a bad idea, which is perfect. Because if I want to keep my focus away from myself and my feelings and my thoughts, being on a kite is fantastic, because that hurts. And on top of that, all that adrenaline and dopamine that gets released after an activity like that actually brings the colors back into my life for a few hours at least. And so far, I'm licensed for scuba diving, skydiving, and dynamic IPSC shooting. I go kiteboarding, snowboarding, mountain biking as much as I possibly can. I have tried, let's say, bungee jumping, zip lining, body flight, wingsuit in a wind tunnel, etc. I've been asked multiple times in my life if I have a death wish. And I don't. I just want to mention that. I do not have a death wish. But the problem is, sometimes life prevents you. Actually, sorry, I take that back. Very often, life prevents you from just downing your tools and going and doing what you feel like. And when that's the situation, that's when my mind pulls out the big gun. Obsession, right? As long as my mind is sufficiently occupied with something, it can't really process any of the negative feelings in my life, which is, I guess, kind of awesome. So whenever I can't move to New Zealand or jump out of an airplane, my mind basically puts my brain into this infinite loop where every single one of my brain CPU cycles is focused on that one thing. So there's nothing else than that one thing that it can focus on. And it can be anything. It has literally been anything along the way, but it's mostly like problem solving, mostly work-related. How can I build this the best way? How can I architect that? Anything that I can focus on. And it's like that every single part of my brain just focuses on that one thing, and everything else in my life just becomes this annoying distraction that just honestly pisses me off. And I'll start snapping at anyone and honestly everything around me that interrupts me. I have been known to yell at my phone for vibrating. It's not a healthy thing to do, I can admit that. But the only thing that matters is that one thing. I need to fix that one thing. And the problem is that obviously affects everyone around me as well, and mostly it affects my wife, unfortunately. The fact that I still have a wife is quite unbelievable. But it also leaves these weird blank spots in my mind. It's looking back at sort of periods in my life when I've had these obsessive episodes, it is as somebody has wiped my memory clean. I have no recollection of what happened in my life during those episodes at all. And on top of that, I don't eat, I can't sleep, and I forget to do like every important thing in my life that I should be doing, which is not good. And at the end, well, I tend to fall off the edge and end up on this slippery slope into depression, which is bad. And the longer I've been obsessed, the less energy I've got left to fight it as well, and the deeper down into darkness I tend to go. And I used to believe that, hey, as long as I stay on the obsessive side, everything is good. So I would force myself to jump from obsession to obsession. Whenever I found the current obsession sort of fading away, I would frantically search for this new thing to obsess about so that I didn't have to go down into the dark parts. But it doesn't work in the long run. Over time, it's just a matter of time before you miss that jump and shit happens anyway. But it's kind of problematic as well because I have a very complicated relationship to this obsessive side of my life. Because on one side, it is really, really beneficial for my professional life, for my career. I can honestly admit that it's the main factor behind several of the MVP titles Microsoft has given me. So it does work for me professionally. But it also, on the other side, hurts people around me, which I obviously don't want, and I tend to end up depressed at the end of it. So for many, many years, I didn't want to acknowledge the fact that I had these problems. I didn't want to own the fact that this was something I had. It was just weakness. It was proof that I was a weaker person than everyone else because everyone else managed to go through life without feeling this shit, apparently. And that worked pretty well for a very, very long time, to be perfectly honest. But as I mentioned before, stuff got worse over time, and it finally got to the point where I kind of had to accept that this was not working out. I had to do something about it. So I was working at a company in New Zealand where we were building these bleeding-edge technology, cool, sometimes fairly high-profile projects under ridiculous deadlines, and for some reason, I loved it. It was awesome. It was perfect for my obsessive side. There was always something new to obsess about. There was always some new solution I had to come up with, and there was always a way to jump from one obsession to the next because there was always something. And on top of that, with large number of projects and short deadlines, if the current project wasn't fun, 3 days later, I would have one that would cause me to obsess over something. So it was perfect to stay on that side. And if you couple that with the fact that I was living in New Zealand, so whenever I needed to sort of experience something else, whenever I needed change, I could basically just walk out the door and there was change. It was new to me. But looking back, it was also kind of obvious that it would not work in the long run. I was going to fall off the edge, and I did. I fell off that edge really, really badly. And it actually ended up being the first time I had to call in sick because I couldn't make myself go out of bed in the morning. It just wasn't possible physically. But the problem is that I'd kind of sort of accepted that these were problems that I had, and they were something that I would have to work on and manage in some way, but I wasn't about to talk to somebody about it, right? That is scary. It took a lot to even accept that these problems were my problems and it was something I would have to deal with. Telling someone? Nah, not going to happen. But the thing is, right, I'm just like you, I'm a developer. I'm a software developer, which means that I'm a natural-born problem solver. So I was 100% sure that, hey, I can figure this out. It can't be that hard. What's the first thing you think of when you want to fight off mental health issues like depression? Happy pills, right? You take a pill and your problems go away. It's awesome. At least that's what the pharmaceutical companies say. But there were two pretty big problems when it came to getting pills in my world. First of all, I was terrified of losing the obsessive side. So I had an edge work-wise, and that was my obsessive side. So getting rid of that was just really not a good idea. And I think I'd just gotten my first MVP, so I think I was probably thinking like, I am moving somewhere in the world. I'm going up. I'm starting my fantastic career now. Getting rid of that, that is scary. And on top of that, you actually have to go and talk to a medical, sort of a professional healthcare person to tell them that you need some medication prescribed. That means going to someone and telling them that you're a weak person, telling them that you're a person that's too weak to be able to adult without proper medication. And if you're my age, and probably older or younger, if you're alive, you have probably grown up with slightly toxic masculinity, with the whole idea of men don't talk about feelings, men don't cry, men solve their own problems, right? So just getting to the point of reaching out and saying that I needed help was fucking hard, pardon the F word. So telling someone about it, nope, not gonna happen. So I decided to try some over-the-counter options, which is basically herbal things, and no, not those kinds of herbs. We're talking, I think it's St. John's wort or something like that. But anyhow, they kind of worked. It did sort of cut off my lows. I felt a little bit better. I didn't feel better. I just didn't feel as shit in some points of my life. But the problem is that it also capped my highs. It basically took my entire emotional span and capped it at both ends, giving my life sort of a solid meh. And if you're me, and you live for these highs where you're invincible and think you can probably fly, that just doesn't fly. It's not going to work. So I actually decided to just suffer the lows as long as I could have my highs. It would just have to be worth that pain to get that stuff that I really wanted. I'm also going to be very honest and say, I am not saying that medication doesn't work. Medication works for a lot of people, and honestly, if I had gotten proper help and proper medication, it would potentially have worked for me as well. But it is still not that simple quick fix that people think. It's not you go in, you get some pills, you start popping them, and life is good. There's a long period of trying to find the right dosage and the right medication, and not all things can actually be fixed by medication, which is important to know. But at that same time, I started doing something else that actually ended up being way more important to me than the medication things. And I didn't actually know that this was good for my health. It's like I started running. I didn't start running because I want to get better mentally. I started running because, honestly, I wanted to look better naked. It's a good reason as any, right? But the thing is, I'm not a very active person, so it sucked. It sucked bad. I have tried loads of things when I was a kid. I tried lots of different sports and activities, and nothing really stuck because I'm not an active person, so it sucked big time. But I'm also very, very fucking stubborn. So I was determined that I was going to get better at running, and I'm going to get better naked, or looking naked. So I kept going, and over time it got better. I could accept running a little bit more. But the main thing, I actually realized that I was feeling a lot better mentally. This stabilized my mental situation a lot. And no, going out running can't break an obsessive episode completely, or it can't break a negative spiral that I'm going through at the moment. But while I'm out running, all of that seems to fade away a little bit. And afterwards, the good part, the running part really sucks. But the afterwards part, when you get all the endorphins, that basically brings me back to sort of a normal life for at least a few hours, even if I'm not feeling well. And over time, that I'll just start running a bit has turned into me working out 4 to 6 times a week. I go weightlifting, I do spin classes, I go mountain biking, I still run a bit, even if it sucks. It still sucks. It doesn't get better. Anyone who says that running gets better is lying. And the thing, though, is I don't do it anymore just because I want to be a different shape than round. I do it because it helps me mentally a lot. And it got to the point where when the COVID pandemic started spreading across the world, I got properly scared. But I wasn't scared about getting sick. I wasn't scared about COVID at all. I was scared because in Sweden, they started talking about closing down the gyms. I have no idea how I would today survive without being able to work out for months on end. So I was properly scared, but luckily they didn't close down the gyms. I went through a pandemic fairly unscathed. I had COVID 3 times, but I was okay mentally. That's the main thing. So if there's one advice that I can give to anyone who's struggling, it is to start exercising. And yes, it is going to suck for you guys too. It's going to suck bad. But if you just work through that and you add a bit of determination, it is going to be worth it, I promise. And if you want to get help getting started with working out to struggle your mental problems, come and find me. I will be more than happy to help out and see if I can get you started. But the thing is, not even exercise can completely remove my problems. And a few years ago, it got bad. It got really bad. It even got to the point where I decided that I needed professional help. I needed to talk to someone. And I don't know if it was because it was that bad or if it was because I had matured a bit, which I highly doubt. But I needed to talk to someone. The problem is, if you come to that conclusion in Sweden on a weekend, there is not a lot of help to get. So I found one mental health care clinic that I could call. So I called them up, explained the situation, and said, I need to talk to someone. It's bad. And she basically answered and said, are you suicidal? And I'm like, no. well, in that case, you can wait until Monday and make an appointment at your local healthcare clinic, and she hung up. And that's not really the response you want to have when you finally figure out that you need to talk to someone. But I kind of get it. They don't have a lot of funding. They have to prioritize. I wasn't going to off myself that weekend, so I could wait. I get that. And I waited until Monday, and I made an appointment, and I got to meet the local guy that they have at my healthcare clinic. And I've never felt as small. I'm not a small person, but I felt tiny walking to that meeting with that psychologist. And the problem was that I had got an appointment with probably the least appropriate psychologist that I could find. I think one of the Three Stooges or Donald Trump might be a little bit worse, but not by much. So within 5 minutes of sitting there in his office, he told me, well, I'm not the sharpest tool in the psychology shed, but, and I was like, did he just say that? Please tell me more, why the hell I would listen to you? If even you think you suck, why the hell would I don't think you suck? And about 15 minutes later, he told me that I had to stop working out because I was treating exercise like a drug, and drugs are bad, okay? So you have to stop. Let's just say I did not return to that guy. I didn't make another appointment with him. And that's kind of the problem when you decide to go and talk to someone. You have to find somebody that gets you and somebody that you feel comfortable opening up to. And the problem is that asshat actually turned me off talking to anyone at all. So I decided that I wasn't going to try again. It was too much of a hassle. I'll just figure it out on my own. And that's not what you want to come to once you've decided to get help. But luckily, this woman figured out, this is a friend of mine, by the way, this is not just some random woman who figured it out, it's a friend of mine. She figured out that I was going through a rough patch, and she called me up and said, so there's this person I want you to meet. And then she added a little caveat saying, she's a little bit odd, so you'll either call me back and say thank you, or you'll call me back and wonder what the hell has happened to my mind. But yeah. I have history with Louise, though, so even if she said that, I decided to reach out to this lady and make an appointment. And I didn't know it at the time, but it ended up being actually a huge turning point in my life, mentally. But I must admit, when I arrived at this lady's apartment for that first appointment, I was 100% sure that Louise had lost her marbles completely. Because she had sent me to this woman called Karina. So Karina believes in healing, crystals, Chinese zodiac calendars, all the things I find about as believable as Santa Claus and Bigfoot. But I don't care. Because when I left that apartment that day, I felt a little bit lighter. It was like there was a little bit more colors in my life, and I felt a little bit better. So I didn't care that we didn't believe in the same things. And I kept going back to Karina for several appointments until she one day said, there's nothing more I can do for you, but you're welcome to come back if you ever need to talk again. And even if I think that meeting with her was probably one of the most important things for my mental health to ever happen, I have never been back to meet her again. Because she gave me the one thing I think that I needed. She gave me an insight that it was okay to feel bad. It was okay to be depressed. And it was just part of being me, and I just had to accept that. And for some weird reason, just accepting that I can feel like shit makes feeling shit a lot better. So in the end, talking to somebody did help, but it wasn't the guy with the diploma. It was the weird lady with the crystals. It's hard to say that, but it's true. And if there's one takeaway from that, I guess it is, if you decide to go and talk to someone and the first attempt is a failure, don't give up, try again. The right person is out there for you. And along the way, you might learn weird shit about yourself. So Karina told me that according to the Chinese zodiac calendar, I'm a metal monkey. Had to Google what that means. Apparently, I'm a metal monkey, which makes me, let's see, intelligent, resourceful, stubborn, and impatient. Which is actually fairly accurate, but I still don't believe in that calendar stuff. But I thought that was going to be the end of my journey into myself and the end of me trying to figure out why I'm such a nutcase in some cases. And I was feeling quite okay until Christmas Eve of 2021, when my parents decided to give me a book as a Christmas present. They gave me this book, Fördel ADHD, var på skalan ligger du? And for those of you who don't speak Swedish, it means advantage ADHD. Where on the spectrum are you? So, my parents gave me a book for Christmas. And so first of all, I don't read books. That's a shitty freaking present to give somebody who doesn't read books. That's number one. And number two, living with ADHD? It's like, I know I can be a little bit volatile, but WTF. It's like I was 40 years old and nobody had ever mentioned ADHD in connection to me. It's like, what? Okay. But I also realize now that there might be a few reasons for that. So mainly, I grew up in the 80s, right? In the 80s, ADHD didn't exist as a diagnosis. It was called, in Scandinavia, DAMP, Deficits in Attention, Motor Control, and Perception. Before that, they called it MBD, Minimal Brain Dysfunction, which is a rewrite from the much more nicer version, which was Minimal Brain Damage. Thank you very much for that one. But it was also reserved for the troubled kids at school. And I wasn't one of the troubled kids at school. I thought school was easy, I got good grades, I didn't get into trouble, and it was highly unlikely that anyone would ever look at me and go, he probably has a mild case of minor brain damage. But the thing is, the book turned out, I actually read the book. That's like step number one. You need to read the book to get it. But it read like a manual to being me. It was like really weird. It explained that a bunch of things that I thought was normal was apparent. Well, I want to do normal like that because there's no such thing as normal. But what I thought was like what everyone else experienced wasn't what everyone else experienced, I think. And it's really hard to know that when you're only given one set of information. You only have your own experiences, so you can't compare it to anyone else. So that was interesting, but I think the most interesting thing about this book for me, or one of the most interesting things, was that it looked at ADHD from a scientific point of view, from a genetic point of view, which I didn't even know was a thing. So it talks a lot about DRD47R. And DRD47R is a special dopamine receptor that you have in your brain. It's in 15 to 70% of the human population, depending on where in the world you look. It's geographical. And it's likely involved in causing the things that we call ADHD. It's not going to cause ADHD on its own because it's part of a bigger dopamine system, but it is highly connected to the traits that we call ADHD. So the general idea with DRD47R, is that it's less sensitive than a normal dopamine receptor, which causes the reward system in the brain of a person with this receptor to work a little bit differently. So because it's less sensitive, it's less likely to pick up on small rewards that you get for stuff like taking out the trash, watching a sunset, or hugging. These were examples from the book. And I actually found the hugging part really, really funny. That sounds weird, I know, but my wife has for years told me that I suck because I don't like giving long hugs. And I can't even disagree with her. I completely agree. Hugs are nice. You hug, you're done, you carry on. Apparently not normal. Apparently your brain is supposed to get small rewards for that and feel this nice, comfy feeling for an extended period of time, so you're going to keep hugging. No, I don't. I might have a weird dopamine system. I can now explain why I don't like long hugs, hopefully. And it's the same thing with sunsets, which was, I think, another example in there. It's like, oh, we sat on the beach and watched the sunset for an hour. It was so beautiful. No! Well, yes, it's beautiful, but we've seen it all before, right? You look, burning ball of gas, going past horizon, seen that, carry on. Apparently, that's not the way I'm supposed to react. And it might also explain why I'm so drawn to extreme sports or adrenaline-intensive activities. Because these sports or activities tend to release loads of dopamine and adrenaline, and that means that even if you have this less sensitive dopamine receptor, you're likely to sort of get a proper reward for doing something like this, which would potentially cause my interest in these kinds of things. But the book also talks about some of the other things that make up what we call ADHD, and one of those things is hyperfocus. And I was 100% sure or knowledgeable about the fact that I had this ability. I I just didn't understand that it wasn't something that everyone else was experiencing. So if you don't know what hyperfocus is, it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's the ability to focus on something so hard that everything else fades away, including time. So I will sit down to do some work for half an hour, and I will then look up, and I've gotten a lot of work done, and 8 hours has passed. I will frequently spend entire days without taking any breaks at all, or I will take a lunch break at 4 p.m. because I haven't noticed the time has passed at all, and somebody forces me to eat something. But the thing is, I thought everyone had this. I thought this was the normal. I just assumed that everyone else had a watch and better time management than me, but apparently that's not the case. You learn something new once in a while. And it's the same thing with one of the other traits that make up ADHD, and that's the lack of input filtering. I didn't know that my mind potentially didn't filter inputs in the same way that everyone else's mind does. The fact that I hear basically every conversation around me, every keyboard press, every phone vibration that happens around me all the time is apparently not the way it's supposed to work. So your brain is over time supposed to figure out that some things are unimportant and should be filtered out and not managed. My brain doesn't have that feature. I keep getting inputs from everything all the time. Things like constant sounds like fans or clocks going like tick, tick, tick for effing hours is really, really hard on me. And even things like that aren't constant, they make me, it's almost worse. Like you're sitting next to a radiator that goes like ding ever so often. No, my brain sits there and goes, when's next time? When is it going to go ting? Is it going to go ting now? Is it going to go ting now? Is it going to go ting now? While I try to focus on something else, and I can't let it go. And trust me, it might not sound bad. It's like, who the hell cares if you listen to the tings of a radiator? It can mess with my focus a lot. But I do think the part in the book that had the biggest impact on my understanding of myself was the part where the author talks about us all being on 3 different spectrums. So that we're all on the ADHD spectrum, the bipolar spectrum, and the autism spectrum. And this idea that we're on spectrums, or these things are spectrums and not binary yes or no's, has given me a new look on myself. Because I used to look at, I have several times in my life asked myself that my obsessive things combined with my depressions, does that mean that I'm bipolar? And I've always come to the conclusion that I'm not bipolar, because there are things that say that I'm not. And it's the same thing with ADHD. I have ADHD quirks, but do I have ADHD? No. And autism, if you ask people around me, I have autistic tendency, if we put it like that, but I'm not going to get into that. But this idea of them being something you have or have not, and coming to the conclusion that I don't have them, means that it has to be something else. So I've never focused at these things because it has to be something else, right? But now that there's spectrums, and I can see them as spectrums, there's a whole new set of things that I can explore about myself, which is exactly what I've done. I've started looking at myself and what I do and how I react to things in relation to these 3 different spectrums, and how that affects me and the people around me. And the more I understand about that, the more I can also find ways to hopefully cope with the problems, or find ways to cope with it. So for example, with ADHD, you often get a really shitty memory. And the reason for that is that you get constantly overloaded with inputs, and your mind basically has to figure out what inputs is important to put into memory, what is important enough to put into storage, and what stuff can I just ignore, which means that my mind continuously, subconsciously, takes input and decides that what's important and what's not, and it basically discards a ton of information that basically makes it look like I don't listen or I don't care about what people are saying, because my mind forgets to record that it even happens. And now that I understand that that is a problem, which I've been told over and over and over and over and over and over again by my wife, but now I have proof that that's the case, which is more important than my wife telling me, apparently, I can start working on it. So going to the grocery store, I will look at my grocery list, and I will try to remember as many things as possible in a row on the list without having to bring the list up again. And I think I've gone from 2 to 4. Maybe 5 if I'm lucky, and that's as bad as my memory is. also makes remembering a whole talk like this for an hour really complicated. But it's all about knowing your strengths and your weaknesses, right? Finding ways to adapt to them. So for my ADHD parts, if I have something that I need to focus on and I need to sort of put all of my energy into, I will try to isolate myself. I will get a quiet room at the office and I will try to get as much input as possible out of the way. For the bipolar stuff, for being obsessive and depressed, exercise seems to work, so I exercise a ton. And the important thing is just, to me, is to continuously understand new things about what I've got and what the problems are, and find ways and make changes to my life so that I can handle it, and figure out how I can get my situation and the interactions I have with other people to be better. I've also come to the conclusion that I don't do well when I work too much. I guess a lot of us probably have that. But I've also made an active decision that I don't work full-time anymore. And it's probably the most important thing I've done for me practically ever. So I have luckily found a company that will support me working 80% in a flexible way. So I work more when I feel good and have more energy, and I work less when I have these rough patches in my life where I don't have any energy, which basically allows me to work around my mental health, which can be really, really helpful, to be perfectly honest. So that's kind of where I am today. It is a constant work in progress, and I know that. I will always have these problems, and I will always try to sort of learn about it. And whenever I learn something new, I will sort of go back and I will look at my old truths and all of the old things I've come up with and see, is there any change I need to do with this new features? I guess it's agile mental health management. And I know I will always have these bad parts, and I'm quite okay with that now. I figured out that I can live with them, but I will also always try to make changes to make the best out of the situation. So I want to use the good parts to my advantage and try to find ways to cope with the bad ones, right? But it doesn't really matter how much you try to figure out every scenario that can happen and have a solution to every scenario, because you're not going to be able to. Shit will still happen, right? And that's actually why we have fire extinguishers, right? Even though we try our best as humans to not set shit on fire, stuff still burns, right? Stuff will still catch on fire once in a while. So we have fire extinguishers. And I have a similar geeky sort of emergency system of my own, and that's Lego. I always have Lego kits available at home, because when shit hits the fan and everything starts going sideways and I start feeling bad, pulling out a Lego kit and focusing everything on that Lego kit for a couple of hours allows me to focus on something else than all of the negativity around me. I think it's in the end just all about constantly making changes or making decisions in your life that push you in the right direction, and not make the ones that push you in the wrong. So I think it's this personal trainer that I follow on YouTube called James Smith who said, there is a difference between exercising and training. And that really resonated with me for some reason. And what he's saying is that if you just go to the gym and you do your exercises, it's not training. You're not going to get the results that you want. But if you go to the gym and you have a short-term plan and a long-term plan and a set goal of where you want to get with your training, that is training, and that is the thing that's going to give you the results. And it's kind of the same thing with mental health, right? If you just go through life hoping that stuff will turn out well, it's likely that it won't. But if you constantly sort of try to work on it and you have a plan where you want to go, then you are more likely to get the results that you need, I think. So I guess there are probably quite a few of you out there now thinking, I don't have these problems. What can I do with this information? This was useless. So first of all, the main purpose of this talk was actually to talk about it, because I think that is the most important thing, which is why I'm here. And the only way that I know how to talk about it is by telling my story. It's kind of the only way that I can do it. And it might also highlight that it is something that can happen to anyone. And statistically speaking, even if you're not affected by this, it is, according to statistics, highly likely that someone around you are struggling with similar things, even if you don't know it. So maybe, just maybe, that tough love comment that somebody just blurted out hit a bit harder than it was meant to. Or maybe that lash out that somebody did at that meeting the other day wasn't because of the contents of the meeting, but because the shit they were going through personally. And that's kind of a problem. We don't always know, or we cannot know what everyone else is struggling with, because mental struggles aren't visible on the outside, which is the problem, to be perfectly honest. So I guess the question is there anything we can do? And yeah, I think there is. First of all, we can start talking about it. I'm here because of that. And we can also make sure, we have to make sure that our workplaces are safe places to talk about things like mental health problems. People have to feel like it's okay to open up and talk about their struggles without being judged. If people can't open up and do that, there's no way for us to know that they are struggling, and there's no way for us to help them. We also need to dial down the pressure sometimes. So it has to be okay to say that I can't take it anymore. There's too much pressure, and a person's mental health has to be more important than some often very arbitrary deadline, right? So I'm not saying that we should throw out the deadlines for our projects whenever we feel like it, but when somebody comes and says, I can't take it anymore, and the stress is causing me health problems, we have to have ways to cope with that. We have to know how to figure that out. And doing things like saying, harden the fuck up, very New Zealand expression, or pressure makes diamonds, or hey, let's just pull an all-nighter and get it done, is not helpful. That kind of has to stop. Yes, pressure does make diamonds. I completely agree. Pressure also bursts pipes and causes explosions. So saying that pressure is always good is BS. Companies also need to take a bit more responsibility when they desire to hire neurodiverse people. So our industry is very different from most other industries, right? And I think that makes it a fantastic place for people with different backgrounds and different experiences to come together and learn from each other, even though it causes friction some of the time. But, and the thing is, on top of that, it's also an industry where people with neurodiversity can really thrive. So the differently wired minds of people with ADHD or autism can actually be perceived as a superpower when it comes to creativity and coding in our business. And we are often more than happy to welcome them into our companies with our open arms. But once they're through the door, we tend to forget about them and the fact that they are a little bit different. So once they're on the payroll, we often expect them to work in the same environment under the same conditions as everyone else. And that just doesn't work in a lot of cases. So a very simple example that happens to be affecting me is, you know, the open office landscapes that our industry seems to love for some freaking reason, even though they suck, like objectively suck according to studies? So for people like me who can't filter out inputs, they cause a lot of problems, because there's always input being thrown at me, distracting me, and causing my productivity to go down to zero in some cases. And sure, most companies have little quiet rooms or small conference rooms where you can go if you need to focus, but the problem is that there are never enough of them, and they tend to be occupied, which is kind of annoying. But it's also kind of funny, because I get the same response very often when I talk about these open office landscapes and my situation, and it is, just put on some headphones. It's not that simple. So first of all, noise-canceling headphones are good, but they don't cancel noise, they dampen noise, and that is often not enough for me to ignore stuff around me. It might actually cause it to be even worse, because low or small inputs like that will cause my brain to focus to try and hear that conversation that is almost not there. And solving that by putting on music might sound like a really good idea, but I have another problem, because whenever there's lyrics in the music, my subconscious will start listening to the lyrics to figure out what they're saying. So half my brain is now focusing on what they're singing in my headphones, and the other half is focusing on why my keyboard feels weird. And that's just sound. Visual inputs is even harder to shield yourself from in a lot of cases. And that's one simple example that happens to be affecting me. I also learned about something called tactile defensiveness when I was researching this talk. I had no idea that this was a thing, but my wife, who's a teacher, told me about it, and I looked it up. And it's what they call the reaction you have when you're very sensitive to touch. And apparently this is quite common in both adults and kids to have autism. And it actually causes things like just certain clothes can be physically painful to wear. And if you feel like wearing socks is physically painful, wearing headphones for a full day, yeah, good fucking luck. It's not going to work. So there's more to it than just wear headphones. But I also think it's a two-way street, right? It's not just up to the companies to fix it. It's up to the individual as well to try and figure out how to adapt and fit into the situation and try to find solutions as well. But I still think companies have the responsibility to understand that we are all individuals, and all individuals have different needs to perform at their optimal. And if you decide to hire somebody that's good at their job, you should make damn sure that they feel comfortable coming to you and telling you about their problems so that you can find solutions together. Because honestly, very simple, a happy, comfortable employee is way more valuable to the company than anybody who's not happy and comfortable. And the changes needed are often not that big, so it's actually quite often that we can give them what they need without it being a big problem. But it's not just about the companies either. It's about the colleagues as well, and that's kind of all of us. And sometimes when I talk about my problems, which honestly at a scale like this is very rare, but it happens, I get questions about what I want people around me to do for me. I don't want people around me to do anything. People around me cannot get rid of my depressions, and people around me cannot get rid of my ADHD quirks. That they're just going to be there, that's it. So there's not a whole lot they can do for me. But there is a thing that I do appreciate. And that's when I tell somebody about my depressions, and they turn around and they say, I'll be there for you. It's like, that works out great. So I appreciate when people sort of accept the fact that I sometimes feel a bit shit and I can be a bit antisocial. And honestly, it's me. It's not you, for reals, for this. So, but I guess the question is then, how would you know that I have these problems? And that's quite simple. If I feel comfortable in the environment and I feel comfortable talking to you, I will tell you about my problems, either because I'm having an episode that you need to know about, or because I feel like I want you to know that this is something that can happen in the future. So you will get to know, I promise you. And all I want, it's not a whole lot, all I want is for people to give me a bit of leeway when that happens. So when I come in and I feel like shit, give me a bit of room. Allow me to skip out then that meeting because I can't be around people right now, or allow me to go into a room and work on my own because I can't be around people at the moment. That's all. It's not that complicated, to be perfectly honest. But as I said, there is one thing that really I like, and that is when I tell people and they say, I'll be there for you. If you need to talk, you can talk to me. And the thing about that comment, if you genuinely mean it, which honestly I can hear the difference, it makes me feel like there is a support system for me. There are people out there who actually care enough to want to be there and talk with me if I need someone to talk to. And over the time, I've realized that I actually have a massive support system. People care. People around you care a ton more than you probably think. But I also want to explain that it's highly unlikely that I will ever reach out. I will not talk to you. That is not the point. The point is not that I need someone to talk to, because I have people to talk to. I'm freaking 42 years old. I've met people along the way. I promise you, I have people to talk to. The point is you saying that you care enough to want to be there and help me. And that makes a difference. And I kind of want to leave the two last slides in my presentation. I'm going to be a bit short, but that's good. I wanted to have two slides at the end for all the people who have told me that I should not be public about this. I should not put my mental health problems or my struggles on social media because it's a private matter. It's something that I should handle privately, and it's not something that I should show the rest of the world. And you know what? F you and the horse you rode in on. I don't care. We kind of need to talk about this. So if you think I should shut up, then fuck off. because we need to talk about it. And to the rest of you, just remember that you have no idea what the person across from you is struggling with, so please be kind to everyone. Thank you all for listening. If you have any questions, we do have a few minutes left. This tends to be a topic that most people don't feel comfortable yelling across the room, but any questions that you want to yell across the room? Yes?
Thank you for talking. It's great. And two terms used quite a few times is accepting and fixing. And have you considered that you might be in a recursion loop? Fix something, fix something, fix something, and you never reach the base case that you are good enough and you don't need to fix something.
Yes, so the comment here is that I've used two terms a few times, acceptance and fix things, and the question is, if I'm on this loop where I fix one thing and then I fix another thing and I fix another thing and I don't get to the base problem of accepting that I'm shitty at certain things. Is that...
Good enough.
Sorry, I'm good enough. That was a much better thing than I'm shit at some things. Yeah, I'm good enough. Yes, I would love to come to that conclusion. The problem is that my mind won't let me come to the conclusion that I'm good enough. And I can stand here. I'm not, right now, I'm obviously not feeling that bad. And now, yes, I can stand here and say, oh, it's all easy. All I needed to do is accept the fact that I can feel like shit. That's simple. But when that shit starts creeping in and you start going downhill, all of that goes out the window. So yes, acceptance and fixing it, I would love to come to the root cause, but I don't think I ever will. My mind won't let me come to the root cause, unfortunately. I can also mention, just for sort of behind-the-scenes bloopers, this talk almost ended up being half the talk. Because I ended up being depressed in the middle of preparing the talk. I got to the point where I couldn't pull up the PowerPoint deck anymore. I felt like shit for a while, and I couldn't pull up the deck. I kind of forced myself through creating the deck. I got that done, and I started to try to learn. And honestly, I've told you about how bad my memory is. Try to sit down with 78 slides and 1 hour of presentation and remember everything you want to say along that time. That is effing hard. So I've actually learned something doing the talk. When I feel down, my memory is even worse. So I felt really, really bad. I couldn't remember anything. Luckily, about 2 weeks ago, things started turning around, and my memory started coming back, and I got the talk written, but I was that close to making it half a talk. But I kind of figured it would be kind of a cool thing to go halfway through the talk and then sort of like make a point of it and say, I felt like shit, I couldn't do the rest of it, as a point of what it's like to be depressed. But I also realized that I wanted to do this talk potentially at other conferences. That point only works once. And I also want to come back to NDC in the future, so yeah. Any other questions that you want to shout out? Oh, there are a lot. Yes? Let's start here.
So, we need to accept mental health problems.
Yes.
We need help with mental health problems. You can't accept that you're good enough on your own. Why not get professional help? You tried it once, you realized you should go back.
Yeah, so what you said was we have to accept that we are good enough. We have to accept that we do have mental health problems. Problem is accepting that we have these problems and that we are good enough that I should go and talk to someone. Was that kind of what you were saying? Sure. Paraphrasing. Yes. The thing is, today, I would feel comfortable. Well, no, that comfortable is the wrong word. I would feel okay going and talking to a professional person today. Luckily, after my sort of meeting with this little weird lady with the little bells and the healing and the crystals and everything, I've actually accepted it, and I've been good enough since then, and that is 7 years ago, I think, where I feel like I can handle it. I know my situation well enough to figure out that I won't get rid of it. Nobody will ever be able to talk me out of feeling bad. That will always be there for me. And right now, I don't feel like somebody can help me to get to a better point because I am well enough at now. But if you ask me in 3 years, and I've had a really shit episode in between now and then, I will have been and talked to somebody. So talking to somebody is really important. But yeah, unfortunately, being a man, it's ingrained in me that I shouldn't go and talk to people. That's not shit we do. And it's really hard to get away from something that you've been told since you were a kid that's like, yeah, stop crying, just, come on, just scrub your knee a little bit. Fuck, my knee is gone. It's like, it's just bleeding a bit. It will be fine, just don't cry. That is hard to get rid of. Does that kind of explain it?
Follow-up then. With exercise,
Yes.
it sucks, right?
So the question was, the exercise, it sucks, right? Not anymore.
No, but you feel good afterwards.
Yes.
Couldn't it be the same with getting professional help?
Potentially, but from my experience, it doesn't help me in that way, unfortunately. It sounds so weird, but the depression part for me sounds much more like a chemical imbalance that I can't get away from. So it's not just about accepting. It's, as I said, I have kind of accepted it. I accepted that I can feel bad. And even, honestly, even when I feel bad, I can now sort of tell myself that this is okay. It will go away. You will get better. And having the feeling of being able to tell myself that it will get better actually helps a lot as well. Because previously I would go into this and it's like, I have no idea how bad this is. I have no idea how far down this fucking black rabbit hole I'm going to go. Pardon the F word. I'm from Sweden. I'm going to blame that. Now I can sort of go, I know it's going to go away. I know I'm going to be able to handle this in some way. There was another question up there. It's the last one. Yes? Shall we? There was a microphone here somewhere. And the guy comes up and says, if you have any questions, there's a microphone. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go 2 minutes long. There will be no questions. We don't need a microphone. Yep, that's how good a speaker I am. There's a microphone on the way. So for the rest, so before the question, I just want to say, I am over time. So if you want to go, I just want to thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed the talk, please put a green note in there. If you didn't enjoy the talk, F you, don't put a note in there. I want to come back, right? Just give me green ones, please. Thank you so much. Question up here in the corner.
I just want to know if you agree with this. It's kind of like a public service announcement more than a question, but the question is, do you agree with the announcement? And it is, if someone is admitting or saying that I'm actually feeling bad, I'm having some problems in my life, I'm going through some struggles, because we are problem solvers, and that's what we do on a day-to-day basis, very often I find that what I and others tend to do is we say, oh, you have problems.
I know where this is going.
You want to... I have some solutions for you. Maybe you should try this, exercising and dieting and everything. I just want to say, it doesn't help. Don't solve stuff. Don't give solutions, right? That's my announcement. Do you agree or no?
It's a fantastic service announcement, and yes, telling you that you should start exercising is something on one level I dislike, because yes, I love that you brought it up. If you go and look at my deck, I have slides that I've hidden that talks about that thing. Please don't try to solve someone's problems. When somebody comes up and says, I feel like shit, I feel completely worthless, it feels like everything is meaningless, and I'm 42 years old, I've had this since I was about 14, trust me, every solution that you can think of is something I have tried. When you're at home in bed for days, feeling like shit, trust me, your mind has gone through pretty much every single solution that anyone else can come up with. Unless you struggle a lot yourself and you have found something that is really, really weird, like, oh, putting your foot in a flower pot with sand makes you feel better. Yeah, please tell me about that, because I hadn't thought about that. But everything else, like, yeah, honestly, exercising, sorry about that advice, but it does actually help, and that's clinically proven. But everything else, like, oh, have you tried mindfulness? Yes, I have tried effing mindfulness. It's fantastic, and I just never get around doing it. So I agree. Problem is that we are problem solvers, especially in our line of business. You just tell somebody that you have a problem, they will go, I can fix this for you. And I'm like, no, you can't. So I agree with you. That's a good comment.
Yeah, and I don't think you did that, because you just talked about your own experience.
Thank you. I'm happy to do that.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I really didn't want to come and say, do this, do that, and whatever. So thank you so much all for listening. I will be around for today and tomorrow. If you want to come and talk to me, please just grab me downstairs and have a chat. That would be awesome. Thank you.